You're listening to the Moon and Manifest podcast. Thank you so much for pressing play today. This is a gathering place for rebellious, freedom-seeking, highly sensitive paradigm shifters like you, who are sick and tired of disappearing into the wrong life. Here, we explore how sensitivity, soul, and emotions can help or hinder your dreams from coming true. You are wired for wonder, my love, and I am obsessed with weaving together science, stories, and sacred practices to guide you in living as your soul self out loud. I'm Lola Pickett, a highly sensitive soul, lunar lover, and moon manifestrix. The moon's wisdom is about learning to embrace your sensitivity and cyclical nature. Resilient embodiment of the moon's medicine has helped me create my 9-year sacred marriage, run a multiple six-figure business, raise my highly sensitive kids, and so much more. Journey with the moon and me, and you can make your dreams a reality too. So much faster and more easily than you might think. Let's get started with today's episode. Hey, my loves. Welcome to the Moon and Manifest podcast. I'm Lola Pickett, and today I have an episode inspired by a listener question. So one of our listeners wrote into the team and asked us to talk more about how to do shadow work. And I loved this question so much because when you are trying to figure this out, because everybody says, oh, you got to do your shadow work. People who don't do their shadow work are just, whatever, right? But what does that actually mean? How do we do our shadow work? What is the shadow? And when you go and you do research online, what it seems like is that the shadow is all the, yucky parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at. And so we bury and repress them. And that's partially true. But it's not the full picture. The shadow gets a pretty bad reputation, and it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all even so-called dark, which I don't love. I don't love this juxtaposition of darkness and lightness because it makes me feel like there's some sort of white supremacy involved in the language we use in spirituality. And I know it's not intended to be that way, I don't think. But it always kind of rubs me the wrong way of light is good and dark is bad. So that's just a side note that I grapple with that. And I don't really enjoy those kind of connotations that go with those words and concepts. Just so you know how I feel about those things. I'm constantly considering the middle earth, middle world here in this reality angle on things in addition to the wider picture. So just have to acknowledge some of the weird stuff in our everyday lives that impacts our language. And okay, that's just a piece that needed to be said. So what the heck is our shadow then? And how do we work with it? And why would we want to? And a lot of people don't want to, right? And so what happens, I want to just paint a picture of what happens with someone who doesn't look at their shadows and someone who does. And there's a lot of types of looking at your shadows. We'll talk about that too, because you can get a little obsessive and stuck there as well, which isn't very healthy. But just overall, someone who's not going to look at their shadows, at the things that are unconscious to them, this is going to be someone who doesn't go deep into their relationships, doesn't create a whole lot of intimacy, kind of skates on the surface. And I want to say that even if that's not how I prefer to live, there are many folks for whom that's just fine. And I'm not going to sit here and go, well, I'm better than those people. I'm not. I'm not better than anybody. And neither are you. But it's not the type of life that I currently resonate with. And maybe it's not for you either. You probably wouldn't listen to this show. But this isn't going to be about pitting good people versus bad people or painting anyone as superior or inferior. But somebody who doesn't do their so-called shadow work isn't going to be someone who you can have a real deep connection with. Why is that? because they don't have a real deep connection with themselves, right? Because they're not looking past the surface in themselves. They're not curious to explore those depths that are underneath the surface, underneath what seems to be. They're not looking at their deeper motivations, their drives, their urges, their emotions. And so again, like I talked about last week, of having that narrow bandwidth through which you are experiencing existence, that is what happens when you aren't willing or able to really look at your shadows and those places where you don't hold a lot of conscious awareness around, because that's all the shadow is. All the shadow is are the parts of ourselves that we can't readily see, the parts of ourselves that we can't readily see, that we're not aware of, that we're not conscious of. They are pieces and parts that, generally speaking, get put away subconsciously by us at some point, out of protection. Generally speaking, it's out of protection so that we don't hurt ourselves. And so the things that are in our shadows, they might seem like it's a closet full of scary monsters, but a lot of times there are many, many beautiful and good aspects of ourselves that get put into the shadow closet because those were not safe for us at some point in our life. It wasn't safe for us to be vibrant and vivacious and attractive and available and intimate and alive and desirable and filled with pleasure. And so those things get put away, buried underneath layers and layers of psychic protection and physical protection too in our nervous systems. So you have that narrow bandwidth of existence that you experience when you're not doing shadow work because you don't have full access to all of who you are. And, that's also like relatively speaking, because full access, I don't know if anybody really has full and complete, unfettered access to who they are. That would be so much to hold psychologically because we're all so incredibly complex that I think it might totally unseat you from being able to function in reality, right? It's like that might just throw you into the realm of psychic overload, a psychotic break. So I'm not saying like what you got to do is understand and make contact with and be the fullest expression of all of you. I don't necessarily think that's wise because we are all beings. So you've got, all kinds of people inside of you. And so what I'm really encouraging in this exploration is how to go about shining a light, illuminating some of these pieces and parts that have been put away, that we're protecting ourselves from, so that we can be more whole and so that we can have a wider breadth of experience and intimacy that's available to us, which makes our hearts feel good, right? To be able to make as full contact as possible with life, to participate as fully as possible with life, to feel safe to be seen as more of who you are versus just the part that makes everybody happy or comfortable, or even the part that makes you happy or comfortable. So when we talk about shadow work, it's not just going into like all of the bad things that we don't want to admit about ourselves, which I think a lot of people assume that's what shadow work is like being brutally honest about our flaws. But that's not it. It's about welcoming back and integrating the parts of ourselves that we have put so far away that we don't even know they exist. And there are signs of what those parts are. And that's where you want to begin your shadow work, is to track the signs that some unconscious part of you has been touched. Because if you follow the signs, if you track them like a wildlife tracker, looking at where they go, you might just find that jaguar in the jungle, right? And in this case, that jaguar is not going to devour you alive if you are resourced and equipped to integrate more of who you are when you meet the jaguar and embrace that that power, that ferocity, or whatever it is that you've put away because it wasn't safe. So, what are the signs? How do you hunt the shadow? How do you track the shadow like a tracker in a meadow? And one of the first places to track are your triggers. So, this one is a tough one because we don't just get triggered by bad things. Anything can trigger us and activate or make contact with some buried part of ourselves, which is really why we are getting triggered. It's not about the other person. We can say like, oh, that person's so triggering. Okay, well, but they're not having the trigger. You are having the trigger, and the trigger is a track. It's something to get curious about. What is getting activated in me? So when we talk about doing shadow work, one of the ways we actually do our shadow work is to, first of all, begin to practice paying attention to when we're getting triggered. And because triggered can have such a negative connotation to it, what I like to call it instead is activated. When we're getting activated by someone or something, by a situation, we get activated. Now, how do you know you're activated? I want you to spend a moment with me here now, feeling into what happens in your body to let you know that you've gotten activated by something or someone. What are the physical sensations? What are the emotions that you feel? What thoughts or stories become apparent? Because there's usually a pattern. Usually it's something like, I feel this sensation, which I label as this emotion, which causes this thought or story. Sometimes it can go in the reverse where you have the thought, which creates the emotion and the feeling, or the feeling and the emotion. You want to learn your pattern. Where and how does it show up first? For some folks, it's in the body. For some folks, it's in the mind. For some folks, it's in the emotions. So doing shadow work isn't just like working with the material. It's seeing that there's material to work with in the first place. Holding that awareness. All right. And then it's to begin to explore, why is this activating you? What about it is activating? Where does your mind go with it? What assumptions do you make? What beliefs become apparent that you have or that you hold? Are they stories about that other person? Stories about yourself? Where do you go with this? This is a very good indication that there is like literally a raw nerve somewhere connected to this thread that got activated by that person or that experience. And when you realize that you've gotten activated, you might not always be able to follow that thread all the way back to the jaguar, like where it comes from and why. And I will tell you that my work is not always about the content of the trigger, the activation, or the trauma. In fact, it can be re-traumatizing, further activating, putting us into additional dysregulation in our nervous systems to fixate on the content, on the jaguar. Instead, we really want to learn how to support ourselves, right? It's like, okay, I'm getting activated. I might not know why, but it's clearly here. That activation, because I'm practicing my awareness and my tracking skills, it's making me feel X, think Y. My body is doing Z. So you want to name those things for yourself. I'm feeling X. I'm thinking Y. My body is doing Z. I'm thinking. I'm feeling. My body is doing. Just those three things. Again, you don't have to go running from that one track all the way down the line to finding the animal. Just being with that track is the shadow work. Why? because it's helping you get intimate with yourself. You are rewiring a pattern of self-avoidance and self-abandonment when instead of running away from these sensations, you turn toward them. You turn toward them because that is where our growth is. That is where we begin to expand the bandwidth of what we have the capacity to experience in our lives. And that's how we open our hearts to ourselves. That's how we find compassion, genuine compassion. Meeting somebody where they are, not just because we can empathize with their position, but because we can make personal contact to our own experience and meet them as a compatriot, as a friend, as an ally in that feeling, personal connection versus empathic, externalized connection. This isn't something I planned on talking about today, but there is that difference between compassion and empathy. And for many of us empaths, what we need to practice as a skill is compassion, which comes from a personal connection to our own experience and our own feelings, and then relating to the other from that place, instead of just putting ourselves immediately in the position of, oh my gosh, if I were that person, I would feel, or I have mixed myself up and I'm feeling that person instead of myself. Can you see how it makes it hard to actually meet someone where they are when you are being them? You have to meet someone where they are by being you. That's why so many empaths feel highly connected, but disconnected at the same time. Because the connection isn't rooted in a personal relationship with the self. And that's exactly what happens with shadow work. So we talked about like the narrow bandwidth person, the person who's living superficially and probably fine with it, or at least not wanting to do anything about it. And then you have the person who's the shadow worker, who is turning toward their activations, who's curious about themselves, who's willing to take responsibility. Now, this is something that I don't see connected with shadow work very often. But ultimately, like the ultimate shadow work, if you want to get an A++ in shadow work, it looks like taking responsibility for yourself. Full responsibility for yourself. That's mature adulthood, right? Recognizing that you're the one that you've been waiting for, that your power is inside of you, regardless of what other systemic and societal oppressive everything might want to hold you back, might in fact make it more difficult for you. Your power is still your power. And ultimately, that responsibility is yours. So you want to do shadow work, you take responsibility for your life. You take responsibility for your impact, for the effect that you have on others, for your well-being. You seek help. You seek support. You ask for your needs to be met because as a shadow work practice, you know what your needs actually are, which are sometimes exactly what's been buried in the shadow. Because for a lot of us, it was not safe to have needs. It was not safe to have needs in our households. And so we put our needs aside. And after years of doing that, they go into the shadow. We can't see them anymore. We don't even know what we want or what we need. If you're somebody who's going, I don't even know what I want anymore. I don't know what is fun. I don't know how to play. I don't know what my needs are. There is your shadow work. And where it starts is looking at what you don't want and what you don't need. Sometimes we have to start with the contrast in order to get to where we really want to be, right? Well, I know I don't want fill in the blank. Certainly don't need that. If you're unclear about where you want to be and who you want to be and what you want for your life because you've been so dead inside for so long, start looking at what you don't want anymore. And I realize that, this episode could have the potential to really shake up someone's life. And I'm here for it because I want you to be awake to yourself. I want you to be awake to life. I want you to be fully alive while you're here so that you and me and all of us, as many of us as possible, can exit this lifetime with as little regret and negative impact as possible. That requires being awake and not in a 5D consciousness. I am more evolved and enlightened than you are type of way. I'm not talking about being woke. I'm talking about waking up, bringing yourself online, being available to mistakes, available to criticism, available to success, available to failure, available to love, available to life. And you want that. You want to take responsibility for your needs by knowing your needs. And by knowing your needs, you might need to start looking at what you don't like, what you don't want, what's no longer working for you. So, maybe you want to take a pause as you're listening to this if you're not driving and sit with those questions for a minute. I'm pausing this conversation for just a second to ask you a question. Are you here because you want to create change in your life, but you don't want to compromise who you are and you want to honor the fact that you are a highly sensitive soul? Then I'm going to invite you to listen to what becomes possible when you say a wholehearted yes to joining Empathology and our incredible community of students.
Empathology came in front of me and it gave me hope in a way that Western medicine had been failing me. So yeah, it was just a gift at the perfect moment.
This is really helping build a strong foundation and not a weak one to, help us carry on and kick butt.
So I want to say that Empathology really helped me get grounded and understand my own ways of responding to things in the external world.
And big vote yes for all things Lola and Tigre and Empathology. And I think that you should be too.
I'm so glad because I can just feel like this first week already has been huge and already have my money's worth in that.
Having the community and the class to work through stuff, it really opened me and my eyes to noticing what wasn't serving me anymore and what wasn't healthy and what my highest self was saying.
After all the feelings of, will I ever really feel something again? Am I not coping with something? Am I numb? And will I ever be able to process all the things that I know have happened? I'm open again.
What I would say to somebody who is considering Empathology is the support of everyone going through the program is second to none. Because yes, we are all in it together. We also support their sense of agency, and that is so empowering.
I love when I have the tools and can use them successfully, and it feels so great. It just feels so wonderful and so empowering, and to use them healthily, my powers as it would be, it's just been very, very positive.
Empathology gave me what I needed to get through that. So it's going to be so supportive in whatever your goals are right now, so supportive for you and your relationships and your relationship with yourself. So do it. There's no reason not to.
This is amazing because I'm not the only one. And I'm loved. And it's the growth. I took my life back from your class. I hope you know that.
Okay, it's me again. Aren't they the most incredible humans you've ever had the privilege to listen to? Well, when you're ready to create your version of these results, visit empathology.net to join the waitlist or register for this life-changing training, coaching, and community for empaths. I can't wait to welcome you inside. Once again, that's empathology.net. And now, back to this episode. Sit with those questions. What do I not need anymore? Because just like shadow work, that's a track. that can bring you closer to what you do want, right? Begin with the opposite. Begin with the opposite. Like, I don't want to be disconnected from myself anymore. Okay. Well, that points to I do want to be connected to myself. And guess what? In admitting those things, you have just gotten more connected with yourself. Winning. So to do your shadow work, you're going to look at your activations, right? You're going to get curious what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what your body is doing. You also want to look at experiences of envy and jealousy, places where you feel insecure, because these are, once again, shadow tracks. And when you follow the envy, it's almost like that contrast. You're envying someone or jealous of someone because there's a clue about something that you want. Because think about it. Do you ever get jealous of someone who's doing something you have no interest in doing? Of course not. Of course not. It's like, why would I be jealous of that? I don't want that. Exactly. Exactly. So you know already that jealousy is pointing a sign to something that you want. And I will tell you that you don't want things that are not designed for you. Resonance is a mutual thing. So if you resonate with something, an experience, an object, a career path, a way of being, an outfit, legs, whatever it is that you're jealous of, there's a resonance there. And when you think about, here's how I like to think about resonance, jealousy, and desire. We don't desire things that we're not a match for. We don't. We might try to force ourselves to because we should want certain things. But that's how you create a life like I created, 10, 12, 15 years ago, where I followed the path of what I should want and I should desire, what should make me happy, but it wasn't mutually resonant. It wasn't what I actually wanted. And so, of course, it didn't feel good when I got there, when I attained those things. Whereas what genuinely you want also wants you. And how this works is like a guitar string. So if a guitar string is attached only at one end of the guitar and you try to play it, what happens? Nothing, right? Like there's really no sound except maybe like a flopping string hitting something. It doesn't make a note. It doesn't resonate. What has to happen is it needs to connect at the other end of the guitar, get tightened a little bit. And then when you pluck it, there's resonance. There's a note, a frequency. So there is a mutual resonance with the things that you desire, and the things that you desire and want can be clarified by looking at any time you get activated into feelings of jealousy or envy. Other places, other shadow tracks, I like that phrase, shadow tracks to follow, are judgment that you hold. Judgment that you hold of other people. Now, people will often say, I'm not seeing you, I'm seeing me in you, right? So I'm not going to say that everybody is a perfect mirror and showing you yourself. We all have infinite variety. We all have validity as human beings. Not everybody out there is just a reflection of me. That's super egotistical. But where we hold judgment of people, especially negative judgment of people, oftentimes what it points to is, again, there's the guitar string of resonance happening, that there's some piece of yourself that you aren't connected with, that you're judging in somebody else. It may be a positive aspect of yourself. It may be a not so lovely aspect of yourself. But whenever you have that judgment that's going out from you to somebody else, I want you to imagine that there's a guitar string connecting you with that person. And the reason you're judging them is because there's a connection point internally. What is that pointing to? If you're judging someone for being ignorant, and it's like you're really judging them, right? Like dismissing them, disgusted by them, mystified by them. It's really activating you. There's an invitation to turn around and ask yourself, where could I be being ignorant right now? What does it actually mean to be ignorant? And we think of being ignorant as being stupid, but that's not actually what ignorant is. It's not knowing or ignoring, which is totally different from stupidity, which is like not able to know. So one of the things about ignorance that I think triggers and activates so many of us is that it seems like it's willful, that it's putting the blinders on information that is there, right? But that person is not looking at, not willing to consider. And so we judge. We judge them as ignorant. And it's really turning around and saying, is there anywhere I'm putting blinders up? Is there any data or information that I'm not looking at, that I'm ignoring? Where am I being like this person that I'm so ready and so quick to judge? Because it's always easier to point the finger, isn't it? Even when we don't want to be that person, it's so much easier to see flaws, faults, and even like fabulousness in other people versus ourselves. And so shadow work isn't also about looking at our negative judgments. It's looking at all the places we externalize and put on pedestals the amazing aspects of people we admire. Once again, there's a guitar string, which means we are also that. Right? We have to, in order to be able to see it, there has to be an internal connection to it. When we're seeing aspects of somebody else, oh, that person is so beautiful, right? So we compare ourselves to them, but we're only able to see that beauty because we are also beautiful. We are also beautiful. I turn this around a lot because I get a lot of those kinds of reflections, especially on social media. And I want to turn it around and say it takes one to know one. And it really does. And that goes both ways. The beneficial side, the admirable side, and the other side. The side that's not so beneficial, not so healthy. And the shadow is really looking at all of that. Right? It's not about the good or the bad. There is everything in the shadow. Good, bad, and in between. Just like there's everything that we are aware of in ourselves. Once again, the shadow is not about the dark, dingy, bad aspects of ourselves. It's just about the things that we cannot see. And I want to remind myself, remind all of us on this journey that just like when we walk around in daylight, we will always have a shadow. This work is never done. You're never, ever going to have full contact with all of who you are, good, bad, ugly, beautiful. Simply impossible. So there's always going to be more layers to explore and uncover. And this is why when somebody is claiming that, oh, I've done my work. I've done that. I've done my shadow work. I've healed. They are closing themselves off to further joy, further connection, further intimacy because they believe they are complete and it is a fabrication. It's impossible. And that's why none of us is superior to any other person because we're all like walking around works in progress, every single one of us. Like I still have shadow work to do. I still have work to do, growth. I'm not done. I'm not going to be done, I hope, for forever. right? I want to keep growing and keep evolving and yet not obsess about it. So this is the other piece about shadow work that can really trap people, because people get so enamored with doing the work that they lose sight of living their actual life, of being an everyday human. Every conversation becomes like a personal growth cauldron, and that can become toxic. You have to, this is something to dip in and out of, just like the tides come in and they come out. There is an ebb and there is a flow. If you don't surface for air sometimes and are always in the depths, well, what happens in the depths is we all turn into anglerfish over time. If you don't know what that is, you should Google it. It's like, whoo, that animal is equipped for where it lives. I will tell you that. But we need to surface. We're designed to surface. We are creatures of the ground and of the air. We're not meant to be in the depths and underground all the time, exploring and spelunking and growing, because it can become an obsession and it can become almost like orthorexia, where you could never be healthy enough. This becomes like I could never be developed enough, could never grow enough. I could never be satisfied and just enjoy and release and be present with what is. So I want you to give yourself breaks too. That's really, really important. In fact, even in our programs, we build in breaks because we're so used to like, no, the only way to accomplish something is just to work harder at it, to just go nonstop. But that's an all or nothing pattern. That's actually nervous system protection, because it ultimately it shuts us down. It's not sustainable. It doesn't work. It's going to go sideways on you. It's going to become shadow territory. The fact that you're obsessed with the shadow, right? So we have to take integration breaks. We have to just go play and have fun and connect with each other in light-spirited ways that aren't all about like, so what'd you unearth from your subconscious today, right? Like we can just be human together. And that's important, right? Just sharing a meal, talking about how beautiful the sky is or what we did yesterday. And I know that many of us here are allergic to small talk, and I get that. But it doesn't have to be inconsequential. It just doesn't always have to be about going into the depths of who we don't know we are yet. That can be very exhausting. It can be exhausting for others to be around. It can exhaust ourselves, right? So as you work to strike a dynamic balance with this, it's not perfect, right? We're not like 50% on and 50% off. But as we kind of ebb and flow through our curiosity around our activations, while we're thinking, feeling what our body is doing, as we're looking at our jealousy and our envy, as we're looking at what we don't want to help point us and track what we do want, what is the benefit? What is the benefit of doing this work and doing this work artfully, dynamically, going in and out of it? Well, we have much better intimacy, right? Because we know ourselves better. So because of that self-intimacy, we can connect with other people at really nourishing levels. We can also see ourselves more clearly. And because we can see ourselves more clearly and we're more compassionately honest with ourselves, we can hold that for other people. So we're able to see ourselves and each other more clearly, which helps us stay away from abusive dynamics, ones that we might unconsciously participate in or even enact. And it gives us more energy because we're coming to our lives as more whole beings. That means we have more to give. We have more to give to our relationships without getting depleted, but we also have more energy for the things that we want to do, for the things that excite us, for the things that scare us, for the adventures that our soul is calling us on. So if you want better relationships, if you want to perceive more clearly and kindly the world around you, and you want more energy, then this episode has some great clues for you about how to actually go about doing so-called shadow work, what that actually looks like. So it's demystifying a little bit, right? And always I'm encouraging you to take what resonates, that's got a guitar string from me to you, and leave the rest. And speaking of resonance is not always the light side. Like I was talking about with judgment, right? Like if you get activated by what I say and then you say, oh, I don't resonate with that, that's actually false. If you don't resonate with something, there's no connection, no activation, no juiciness, no zings or tingles. There's just nothing. The guitar string does not plug in. So if you're getting activated by me or by anybody else or by a situation, it's because there's resonance. Resonance is always mutual. So don't go telling yourself, oh, that doesn't resonate with me because you don't like it, because something gets activated in you. That's actually a sign that it does resonate with you. You just don't like it. But there's a connection there that would be very valuable to explore in the ways that we talked about today. So I hope this episode has been illuminating for you, clarifying around what shadow work actually looks like, how to do some of it, and the importance of dancing in and out of that so you stay present and human and allow yourself the full spectrum, which includes the surface and the depths. And I look forward to seeing you in next week's episode. Until then, be well. Thank you so much for being here and choosing to complete this episode. That tells me that you have it in you to do what it takes to change your life, even if you don't quite believe that about yourself yet. To that end, I have 2 invitations for you, love. The first one is simple. If you find yourself nodding your head as you listen to the show and deeply resonating with what gets shared here, then you're going to love the soothing meditation I've put together for you. Normally available just for my Moon and Manifest Collective membership, I'm now sharing my Soul Self Subliminal Activation audio with you. This restorative, empowering hypnosis contains no words you can hear, but is imprinted with my voice and vibration, along with binaural beats and gentle music. It's perfect to listen to as you fall asleep, to integrate everything you're receiving from the show. To download this free audio now, simply come to moonandmanifest.com/activate and enter your email so we can send it to you. That's moonandmanifest.com/activate. Secondly, if you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe to the show and leave us a review on iTunes. Your review helps other folks like you find this podcast. Together, we'll make this world a place where we are more in tune with nature and more sensitive souls than ever before are unapologetically thriving. Hell to the yes. All right, my love. Thanks. Be well, and I'll see you next time.